I ended up spending a year in psychological warfare in Vietnam as an intelligence analyst. Not much of what I did there applies to today, except for the fact that I dealt with terrorism every day. I'd start out my morning inspecting whatever vehicle was assigned to me, looking for bombs and wires that shouldn't be there. Because I saw what happened to the guys who didn't find the wires that shouldn't be there. It was very graphic what happened. I've spent most of my adult life, in other words, knowing pretty much what we've got to deal with. That's been my burden to carry. We're at war, ladies and gentlemen. What I found out when I was studying the Middle East is that our opponents are very bright, they're very well educated, and they're not only willing to give up their life, they're looking forward to giving up their life to gain their goals. Most people heard on mainstream media a few weeks ago about Mr. bin Laden meeting with the chief of security for Europe of Mr. Saddam Hussein. That was pretty widely publicized. The Iraqi intelligence service was set up by the KGB. Training, equipment, tactics, techniques, all KGB. In fact, Iraq is a Russian client state. You need to know, ladies and gentlemen, who your enemy is before you have any hope whatsoever of winning. If you don't know who your enemy is, you're doomed to failure. We didn't know how they think, what they believe, why they believe it, or we don't have any hope of success whatsoever. The German army would come into a Polish village, arrest or murder on the spot the Jewish inhabitants, and a few, typically people in their late teens to early 20s, would run out the back door into the woods as the Nazis were coming in the front door. And they would run through the forest. Didn't have proper footgear, no poncho, no tomahawk, no knife, no gun. They'd run until they get to the next village, to their cousin's house. They get to the cousin's house. They say, the Nazis are at our village. They're arresting people. They're killing people. We need to get out of here. You know what? They didn't leave. They did not leave. A day or two later, the Nazis show up at the village that the youngsters escaped to, and the same thing repeated itself. This happened dozens and dozens of times. Deny, deny, deny. Very human characteristic. Other less specific infrastructure targets would be anything having to do with telecommunications. The national power grid. You know, a lot of us, and I know many of us in this room, made extensive preparations for Y2K. And I found out while studying for that event how interconnected our national power grid is. Interlocking and interconnected it is. Nuclear weapons. Very few people in positions of authority, Secretary of Defense on down, will say no, they don't have them. They simply won't make those statements. They won't do it. We've known for several years now about the alleged missing Russian suitcase nuclear devices. Well, let's see. The Russian suitcase bombs are missing. Osama bin Laden's been in touch with the Russian mafia. Osama bin Laden has tens of millions of dollars. The Russians don't. I wonder if we could be putting together a picture here. Yeah, I wonder. The difference between American doctrine and Soviet doctrine on biological weapons. American doctrine is as follows. Americans will only make biological weapons for which there is either a cure or a vaccine. At least one or the other. Soviet doctrine, Russian doctrine, is to only make biological weapons for which there is no known cure, no known vaccine, no known treatment, except keep the person comfortable while they die. All the criminals will no longer want to take advantage of you. They won't want to take your watch or your money or your stereo. All the criminals will become good guys. Anybody believe that? I don't think so. I've sat this close to literally hundreds of men and some women, hundreds of men charged with the most vicious and vile crimes that you can imagine in the interview room, in jails. Hundreds of them. And I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, they look at a crisis, any emergency, whether it's a flood, or earthquake, or hurricane, or war, as economic opportunity.